Welcome back to the show. I am Mikhail. On today's interview, I am talking to Ethan of ChainStack, which is a blockchain infrastructure platform designed to streamline the development and management of blockchain applications. It offers a user friendly interface and supports multiple blockchain protocols, ensuring compatibility with different networks. With a focus on security and privacy, ChainStack provides a simplified experience for businesses and developers, removing the complexities typically associated with blockchain technology. In essence, whether you are a crypto retail investor or you are a developer, this is an interview that you don't want to miss as it is a very critical part of Web3. Please support our members, subscribe to the channel, like this video so more people can learn about this amazing information. And if you're interested in joining the Network Spotlight community, then go to networkspotlight.io. Thanks and enjoy the show. Ethan, I appreciate you jumping on this call. How have you been?
I've been doing pretty good. Excited to have this conversation today.
Yeah, I know last time you and I talked, we had Nick as well, and we were doing a Twitter space with Nikolai from Morales as well, and really enjoyed that conversation. I think it's a conversation that we need to have more often, which is around infrastructure, right? I always compare it to something like exercise, and working out your core is probably one of the most important things you could do to your body, but a lot of people are more concerned about working out their chest, their shoulders, their legs, because it gives that appearance, right? But none of those things really matter unless you take care of that core, and it kind of keeps everything else in place. That's basically the analogy that I draw to infrastructure. So before we dive into what you do, can you define like what exactly is infrastructure in Web3, and why should the everyday crypto investor, like why should they care about infrastructure?
Yeah, I mean, I think the analogy you use is pretty good. I like that. Working at your core. I see it in a similar way. I think that generally infrastructure as a topic, especially when you're coming from the investor side or the general user side, usually isn't something that's covered very often. But I think that it should be covered more often because it really is one of the most foundational and important pieces to Web3 and its trajectory in the future. And the word foundational, I think, is really important. And I think to kind of provide a parallel to your analogy, I see Web3 as almost sort of like building a house or like a structure, right? And you want the structure to be built very quickly. You want it to be very new, very innovative, right? But to get there, the foundations of the structure that you're building need to be strong, right? It can't be made out of twigs and grass. It needs to be steel or whatever it may be. So this analogy kind of leads to the fact that um, at the foundation of Web3 is infrastructure, right? These are things like nodes, RPC nodes, right? This is what, even as a user, you call RPC nodes every single day. As a developer, as a dApp creator, your application is powered by RPC nodes, as well as a number of other infrastructural solutions like subgraphs and various APIs and stuff like that. These pieces of infrastructure make up the foundations of how you as a user interact with Web3 and how developers build applications that you interact with, right? So if these foundations aren't strong, if the RPC that you're using isn't fast or it's not built correctly, or it's not very flexible or whatever it may be, then these are things that will hinder your experience as a user as you use Web3. And that'll also hinder the experience of a developer and reduce the amount of time they can spend building an innovative product, right? So this is why having high quality Web3 infrastructure is so important because it, as a user, betters your experience, makes it so that you can interact with things like Uniswap or whatever faster. But as a developer, good infrastructure means that they can spend more time building the actual product and less time on kind of this boring backend stuff that maybe isn't as important. So, what we're doing at ChainStack, and we'll kind of get into this, but we're trying to create an environment for developers with infrastructure to build applications where they can focus on innovation rather than wrestling with low latency or lack of features or whatever it may be. So, you know, the one point to take home is that infrastructure is the number one most important thing when it comes to what enables Web3 innovation and what enables a space to move forward into the future.
So I look at the space right now in two different ways. You have like the really amazing tech that's being built, and from, not financial advice, of course, but me as an investor, when I look at that, I'm thinking long term, right? Can this particular chain, for instance, like, can it scale? And scaling is a big, what you guys are doing at ChainStack is a big contributor to that. And then, of course, you have what a lot of people may feel like taints the industry, which is like the meme coin space, and seeing coins go parabolic. And I guess that's more for short term fun. It's gambling. What you guys are building, what you're supporting, is for these chains that are here for the long run, right? You're helping the developers build out and scaling these solutions. So for the everyday investor, I guess I'm trying to help them understand that this is not something what you would find with like a meme coin. This is like very, very high technical, solving real world problems. That's what you're seeking out to do with ChainStack.
Yeah, infrastructure and at the core of Web3 is like meme coins are great or whatever. Like, I mean, depending on who you are and who you ask. And like these short-term gains and profits are good because they're fun, right? And they leverage blockchain technology to kind of create these unique experiences. But Web3 is a huge industry, and blockchain is a huge industry, and has a lot of potential that hasn't been realized yet, right? I mean, blockchain has a potential to transform healthcare industries and IT and every financial sector, right? And we're not quite there yet, but to get there, right, you need to invest time and effort into building the foundations for that. Um, while you're using meme coins and trading this stuff, like you'll get short term profits, and you probably are still using some level of infrastructure. But really, the work that we're doing, especially at Chainstack, is with that long term vision, right? We want to help people create applications that will one day be the apps that transform finance or transform healthcare or whatever other industry Web3 will impact, which I think will be a lot. But when you're investing time and effort into building this more technical, less exciting, less short-term technology, um, what you're really doing is you're investing in the innovation and the future of Web3.
So let's go through some of the chains that you guys are working with. Can you give some examples of almost like a before and after they started collaborating with you? Any success stories that you could share?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of blockchains, right now we support over 23 different chains on our platform. So developers can leverage 23 different blockchains, pretty much any major blockchain that you can imagine using. A developer can load up and deploy on Chainstack. And of course, even with some chains like Avalanche, for example, we've been a big player in their subnet technology, which is a really fantastic scaling solution for developers. We've been a big proponent of that and been a big provider in creating subnet technology in terms of like providing the infrastructure for people to run subnets. Um, so this has been a big part of our strategy. And on top of that, you have, of course, blockchains, which we work with to deploy nodes, or people like Avalanche, which we work with to help developers deploy subnets with like hosted solutions. But of course, there are thousands of developers that use Chainstack to power the backend of their application. So we have organizations like CoinGecko, Axelar, uh, Trust Wallet, right? These pretty huge players, Chainlink. These are partners of ours that use Chainstack and leverage Chainstack to run the backend infrastructure of their applications and these huge, massive enterprises that they're building out. So from virtually every level in the Web3 industry, right, from the top level of the blockchains that you're using every day, right, to Avalanche, so the applications that you're using that are running on subnets or running on mainnets, they're probably a lot of them are using Chainstack in some way or another to achieve these all the way down to like the small time individual developers that are creating applications that maybe only 100 people use. From every level of this sort of stack of builders, Chainstack is a tool that people commonly use to empower this building experience.
I want to get a little bit technical. This is more of a question for the developers. So, why would why do applications choose a subnet versus, say a mainnet? So you mentioned Avalanche right now and how that seems to be a trend in terms of building within subnets. Why is that the case?
Yeah, subnets have been a really exciting technology that have popped up over the last few months, few years. And like I mentioned briefly, we've been a big part of the evolution of subnets as it relates to being accessible to developers and stuff like that. Because really, when you look at subnets are at its core a scaling solution for developers to run applications that aren't like bounded to the mainnet, right? So I sort of think of it as like in my head personally as sort of like highways, right? So you have like one big main highway for a blockchain, right? But the more people that are driving on this highway, right, the more congested it gets. And what subnets allow you to do is instead of having one big main highway, right? Let's say you want to open up your own highway that's right next to the highway that's maybe connected, right? So then with you open your subnet, you use chain stack infrastructure, whatever you need to do to run the nodes for it. And that's opening up an additional highway next to the main highway that you can then have your own group of cars drive on. That's much less congested and limited than that kind of main highway. So this is just kind of an easy to understand analogy for what subnets do and the value they provide to developers. Because really what they allow you to do is, especially for large applications, you can create your own ecosystem, right? This is a sub network within the Avalanche ecosystem. And the possibilities for that in terms of the type of applications you can build and what it opens up in terms of scalability, processing power, performance, and reliability of these applications is huge. So we're really excited to be a part of that. And I guess for those who don't understand, the way that ChainStack's a part of that, right, is that when you want to run these subnets, you need nodes and you need more foundational infrastructure to open up these side highways, right? And that's what we help developers achieve through those nodes and foundational infrastructure.
Let's kind of pivot the conversation to your support with developers because that's essentially what your role is. So I'm curious to understand how ChainStack supports, these builders that are coming on board.
Yeah, a big part of our business model is, I mean, beyond just the fact that we're providing this infrastructure, um, our primary mission is connecting developers with infrastructure, right? So we're not only providing, we want to connect people with that. And of course, in doing so, that empowers innovation, as I was kind of talking about earlier. But we want to give developers an experience that's accessible and that's powerful for their application. So we primarily support developers and kind of create this experience with them through three key foundations that I usually like to kind of call back to. Number one is pricing. Number two is performance. Number three is flexibility. Nailing these three things down for developers is key in creating a powerful application. So, number one, affordability is probably the most important, right? For everyone, from individual developers that are spending $100 a month on infrastructure to enterprises that are spending tens of thousands a month on infrastructure. Um, Saving money is really important. And we recently actually released an article that goes into how ChainStack compares over other competitors in terms of pricing. And on average, we're up to 66% cheaper generally, but even in some use cases, 86% cheaper. This is a huge game changer for developers, right? Saving 66% of your infrastructure cost every month is the difference between shipping this month and shipping in 6 months, right? It frees up a lot of resources. So this is a big way that we support developers through very transparent and industry leading pricing. Beyond that, you have performance, right? Building applications are very reliant on having high performance nodes. This means latency, right? Is your node taking, uh, you know, 800 milliseconds to get a call back to you? If it is, then it's going to be really difficult to have kind of a cohesive application. Is it rate limited? Is it limiting the amount that you can actually send requests in? These are two things that we also focus a lot on, right? We have industry leading latency, and we actually don't rate limit anything. The third is flexibility, so enabling a variety of applications, right? Letting builders build anything from DeFi applications to NFT applications to new verticals that we haven't even thought of yet. Flexibility through, understanding where you're deploying your node, kind of like we were talking earlier briefly. So geolocations, cloud providers, the type of node that you're deploying, stuff like this is also a really important component. So it's through these three things that we're focusing on that developers can leverage to build their applications, and of course, enhance their building experience and create something that maybe they couldn't have created before without these three things being nailed down. So this is really where we shine on the infrastructure side. And then in terms of supporting developers, we also spend a lot of time on education, right? Because you can give developers all of this great infrastructure. If they don't know how to use it and they don't know what to build or how to build it, then it's going to be difficult to leverage that completely, right? And leverage the extent of what we built out for these developers. So we have a ton of articles. I don't know the exact number, but it's a lot of articles that we've released over the past few months, few years at our ChainStack docs. These are articles that go through 0 to 100 of how you can build different applications. Right? How do you build um, an NFT marketplace, or how do you build this type of application with subgraphs, or how do you index Bored Ape Yacht Club, or whatever it is, right? We spend a lot of time creating content for developers so that they can not only leverage ChainStack's infrastructure, but understand how they can do that, and how they can continue building their applications efficiently. And then, as an extension of that, of course, a big part of my job as developer relations is supporting developers as they leverage this through content like that, but also through things like Twitter Spaces, Twitter threads, engage with developers directly. And these are all things that we do as an organization to support developers as they push the space forward.
You mentioned that there's really three attributes that you contribute to like your success. You mentioned your focus on the pricing, the flexibility. So in general, with these specific factors, how are you? You know, it's one thing to say like, "Hey, we focus on this," and it's another to actually be able to do it. Is there anything specific around your technology that allows you to provide the competitive pricing, for instance?
Yeah, so I think that's a good point. And we covered this, in talking about the pricing specifically. We covered this briefly on our, pricing article that we recently released. But when you're looking at infrastructure providers, right, what happens a lot is that number one, they're very expensive, right? So like we mentioned, we're much cheaper than everybody. So when you look at the providers, they're going to be 66% more expensive. Of course, depending on different factors, which is a lot. And then, usually with that expense, you'd expect higher performance. But what we found is that's not usually the case. Performance doesn't, and a lot of providers don't usually justify the expense that they're charging. Um, and the reason why they're so expensive is through like not super transparent pricing. So they actually don't charge each request as one request to their bill. They charge requests based on weight. Oh, what a lot of these providers do, not all of them, but most of them. So let's say one call, a call to get balance might be different than a call to a contract or whatever it may be, or get block, right? These things aren't completely equal in how they bill you. All right. So if you have an application like an NFT marketplace that makes a lot of one call that's expensive, that it takes up a lot of credits, right, for these different providers, then they charge you a lot. Rather than on ChainStack, we bill every call, regardless of what call it is, as one request. We don't discriminate against these calls, which means that we can charge a lot less because we don't base our pricing on the type of application that you're building. So this means that you don't have to be afraid to build the application that you want because it's going to cost you $1,000 a month and bills because of these kind of request weights. So that's the way that we achieve our pricing model, is through that transparent and very simple pricing model of it's just one request per request that you make, and it's this monthly payment, and you have this usage fee, and it's all very you can calculate exactly how much you're going to be spending every month, which differs greatly from sort of the industry standard. And then for performance, the way that we achieve performance and flexibility for developers, that of course, I like how you said we focus on this, but the way that we achieve this is through another case of transparency, right? Transparency is really important in infrastructure. And this transparency stems from the fact that primarily when it comes to performance, right, geolocation is really important. So if you're in Kansas, right, and you're trying to get data from a node in Singapore, it's going to take a long time to get that information because it's very physically far away from you and far away from the server that you're calling it from, right? Versus if that node was a house away from you or a block down from you, the distance, right, and the time that it takes to get that query is much less. So this is important, right? When you're deploying nodes and you're running your infrastructure, it needs to be in locations that are transparent. So you need to know where you're deploying it, and you need to have control of where you're deploying it. And then beyond this, you need to have control over what cloud provider you're using, right? Which contributes to decentralization. So you want to Maybe you want to deploy on AWS in Virginia, or maybe you want to deploy on Google Cloud in Singapore, or maybe you want to deploy on Microsoft in the UK, right? These are all things that within our platform we allow developers to do. So you can choose not only the cloud provider that you're using, but the exact location that you're deploying the node, so that you can have a lot more flexibility over the performance, so the latency of your node, and a lot more flexibility in terms of the usability of your application as it relates to the infrastructure calls that you're making.
You spend a lot of time talking to developers. What kind of trends are you seeing right now? This is obviously a very fast growing and changing industry. Where are majority of the builders spending the most time these days?
Yeah, I think we talked about this briefly, but of course you have meme coins and like these kind of like short term things that a lot of time is being spent on. But I think really what you see a lot of developers doing is a lot of developers have recognized the potential of blockchain, the potential of Web3 as we kind of grow into these next few years. We came out of 2021 and like some of 2022 from this huge bull run, and it caused a lot of innovation, right? All this money flowing into the space, a lot of developers came in, and then everything crashed, and now we're kind of in this, bear, not super crypto wintry type of situation. So I think the developers that are left, right? Of course, like I mentioned, you have some developers that are primarily here for money, but I think for the most part, the developers that are here and building every day and here from Monday to Sunday, 7 days a week, are people that are building for the future of blockchain and are building applications for kind of like what we mentioned, for the healthcare industry, for supply chain management, for banking, right? These things that are really innovative and maybe haven't popped up before, right? Or even like a Web3 native applications like DeFi, right? Every day I talk to developers and I see new projects come up that have new takes on these different industries and these different verticals that I've never seen before. I've been in Web3 for a little over 3 years now, almost every day, 12 hours a day. And every day I see new applications pop up that I didn't even know were possible, right? And these are because developers right now are really focused on creating applications that leverage blockchain that haven't been made before, right? They're trying to realize the potential of the Web3 industry and doing so through very fast paced innovation. And I think, usually the message that I give and kind of the thing that I see from developers is that a lot of developers right now are taking the time during this sort of crypto winter to build and spend a lot of time on developing applications so that when the next bull run comes, whatever that may be, maybe in 5 years, maybe in 1 year, maybe in 20 years, who knows, right? They'll be ready, right? So they'll have this application that they built out. They'll have this novel application, this new idea, and then when this run comes, they're prepared to kind of capitalize on that and scale their application and create a company out of it. So this is what I see a lot of developers focusing on. Right? I spend a lot of time in Solana and different hackathons, and really there's a lot of very exciting innovation happening, and it's all in preparation for this next time and kind of this mainstream adoption of Web3, whenever that may be.
AI seems to be a very buzzword these days, and there's a lot of activity happening there, not just around blockchain, but some of it is transitioning into blockchain. We see some of the work that Fitch.ai is doing, Singularity.net. Are you seeing anything on your end, like as you're talking to developers, where you feel the impact of AI?
Yeah, I think AI is a massive industry that's just now being built. Of course, AI has been around for a long time, but it's never really been in the sort of public perception that we're seeing today, right? Sort of like it was really cool to watch, right? Everybody sort of had this like aha moment, almost like this light bulb moment with AI. Just over the past few months, as like ChatGPT came out, right? Where everybody from like regular people to developers realize the potential of this technology as it relates to the future of not only Web3 but just like technology in general. I think in Web3 we've seen a lot of that innovation start being realized. Maybe not as fast as Web2 institutions are adopting it, but I think it has a big part of Web3. Of course, on the surface level, right, you have things like I guess most recent examples like ChatGPT plugins, right? These are things that aren't like directly Web3, but you can adapt them to work with Web3 and make Web3 easier to interact with, right? So I actually tweeted earlier today a picture of a plugin that myself and the developer advocate lead at Chainstack have been working on that allows you to, through natural language, interact with the Chainstack platform, right? So you can say, I want 3 nodes in Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, and AWS located across different parts of the world, and then it can do that, which is just a cool, it's a cool use case of AI, being able to interact with these different APIs and platforms, Web3 platforms, and even like just Web3 itself through natural language, through these language models, is just a short term, exciting prospect. But of course, in the long term, right, on like you can look at stuff like data storage, right? Language models take up a massive amount of data and cost a ton of energy to train, right? This can be something that can be done through like decentralized computing and have some sort of role in Web3. I've seen Web3 applications that are powered by AI, right? So you can have like AI driven market makers, or whatever, maybe like the possibilities are endless here in terms of AI enhancing what Web3 is building. And I think in a lot of ways, maybe not all that are obvious right now, but I think over the next few years, we'll start to see AI and Web3 really intertwine into this kind of more cohesive, coherent technology that support each other.
How do you at ChainStack stay up to date with, like all this amazing technology that's being built, all this innovation? Like, how do you stay ahead of that and make sure that the solutions that you're providing is able to support these builders that are building these things that, like you said, some of it you've never heard of before?
Yeah, I mean, we have a really great team of 70 to 80 people now. So we have a very large team, especially for Web3. That's a pretty large team, and we're all very passionate about Web3 and the space. So everybody at ChainStack is always on Twitter and on these different platforms, and constantly trying to learn and come up with new ways that, as an organization, we can support the innovation of Web3. But of course, beyond just the fact that our team is always seeking for these things and kind of looking for new ways that we can, support developers and support the space that moves forward, we have a lot of really great partners, right? I mentioned a few earlier, right? But we have thousands of partners and people that use our nodes is kind of what I'm referencing, as well as more direct partners that we talk to regularly. And we have really great relationships with a ton of industry players, and these people do a really great job of supporting us and helping as we kind of progress through the industry. And we've had a few just recently. You could probably scroll down on Twitter and see 10 partnership announcements in the last month, where these are teams that we're actively collaborating with, both on the infrastructure side. Like you have companies like Covalent, right? We just did a big partnership with them and integration within our marketplace for their data API. It's just another thing, and we're constantly connected with their team, as well as these protocol teams that we're partnered with, right? Avalanche, Oasis, we recently did something with, Polygon, right? Um, we do our best to stay tapped into the entire industry through these strategic partnerships and through providing them with infrastructure, to the point where we generally like to consider ourselves as pretty plugged into the space and always trying to find new things that we can release, new products that we can start building out, and updates that we can do to kind of stay ahead of the curve and support developers as they start to adopt these new technologies and kind of these changes in the industry.
So it sounds like it doesn't matter if you're just a regular crypto retail investor or you're a builder. It's important to make sure that you're staying up to date with everything that's happening at ChainStack. Where can people follow along and just continue to learn more about what you guys are working on?
Yeah, so we have a few pretty great resources for not only following Chainstack, but following the people that we collaborate with and kind of this general space and ecosystem that we're building out. Number one, probably the best place is our Twitter at Chainstack HQ. We post there multiple times a day usually. That's where we do all of our partnership announcements, and we post Twitter threads over there and links to all of our articles and documentation and updates to any products that we make. That's a really great place, sort of a news feed for what Chainstack is doing. And of course, for more like a infrastructure developer ecosystem side of things, you also have my personal Twitter at Tabasco Web3, in which primarily my job over there is representing Chainstack. But I do a lot of threads about not only what Chainstack provides, but also kind of what we talked about today, which is the industry in general and how technology is evolving and stuff like AI and all that kind of stuff. So if you'd like to stay up to date with Chainstack at Chainstack HQ, if you'd like to stay up to date with the Chainstack ecosystem at Tabasco Web3, is my Twitter account to do that there. We also have our website, chainstack.com, for developers looking to leverage node infrastructure, or for just regular investors and users that want to learn more about infrastructure and learn more about development, maybe understand a little bit more about what that space looks like and leverage that as you're navigating through the investing space and Web3 in general. It's all really great knowledge to have, and we have a ton of it over at chainstack.com. So these are three places that are constantly being updated and that you can definitely rely on for high quality information.
And I'll be sure to include that in the description. Ethan, any parting thoughts for the listeners?
I appreciate you having me. It was a really great discussion. A lot of really exciting stuff is happening in Web3. It's kind of hard to understate how uh, it, how fast the space is moving and the velocity in which the space is evolving. I think really what's important is whether you're a developer that's creating the applications that are kind of building this future of Web3, or whether you're a user that's using them, or an investor that's watching this evolution. It's important to constantly stay updated and just know that the future looks really bright for Web3, and contribute wherever you can. It's super important.
Absolutely. I personally believe that, companies such as yours, that is, well, not your company, but the company you work for, Chain Stack, you guys are kind of in the background, right? And your partners tend to be a little bit more forward facing in terms of what's happening in the media, and in terms of where a lot of the retail interest is. But having an understanding of what you're doing, the technology aspect, and how it impacts everything else is extremely important, like we talked about. And also for the developers, of course. If anybody has any questions, please reach out to Ethan, or feel free to reach out to me, and I'll get you guys in touch. Ethan, thanks so much for joining the conversation. It was a real pleasure as always, and certainly stay in touch.
Perfect. Sounds good. Appreciate you having me.